Alrighty, here we go. That is not the name you want for a show when you're trying to present factual things. That was, I don't know if she's trying to be tongue in cheek when she chose that name, but that is not the type of name you want to brand yourself with.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Today we're going to be talking about this low T society that we find ourselves living in. Now, testosterone, of course, is a sex hormone, and even though women do produce testosterone, or in other words, we need it too, testosterone is mainly known for being the major sex hormone in men. Within the past few decades, though, researchers have begun to notice that testosterone levels in men are dropping. And even though some people might be cheering that on as if it signals the death of toxic masculinity or something, in this video we're going to be talking about why that trend is worrying and the way.
So, yeah, there's some studies out there that show the decline in testosterone in men. But the study she uses is a little more complicated. That she's going to back up this downward trend and what it is. But a good part of it is a change in lifestyles, right? So we're not working in even now generally not working in factories and stuff like that. We're working more sedentary jobs. Our diets aren't great compared to what they were in the past. I mean, not that they were great in the past either, but just what they are now is not good for us, right? And so that's going to be part of the decline and all that other stuff, or at least according to her study. And the study suggests that while they tried to adjust for those variables, it still requires additional research to determine if because all the change might strictly be because of those variables, but they're just not accounted for quite right in their study. So that's the one thing with their study, but we'll read that part when we get to that specific study here.
Ways it's likely affecting our societies. But before we get into it, I have a quick.
Nope, you are not chilling on my channel. Where is the Jesus Christ?
Or 1900s and thought to yourself, in regard to the masculinity on display, man, we don't make them like we used to. Well, by and large, at least.
I mean, we're taller than we were 100 years ago, right? On average, here, right? So the bigger, beefier guys that you think are or she's going to portray as the ultimate masculinity and all that other stuff that she thinks is lost now is not a thing 100 years ago, right? Or generally not as common as it is now. But she's going to do what she's going to do.
According to science, you'd be right. As the Huffington Post reported, quote, "At present, our testosterone levels are under siege. Various factors appear to be pulling our T levels into the gutter, from sedentary jobs to poor diets and lifestyle choices to more ominous influences like environmental toxins." One particularly disturbing study, published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism in 2007, indicated that men's testosterone levels plummeted 17% from 1987 to 2004. And that's controlling for health and lifestyle factors, such as obesity and diabetes, that are known to affect T levels. The study found not only that individual men were losing testosterone as they aged, which is fairly normal, but that same age men from later eras had substantially lower T than their predecessors. A man who turned 65 in 2002, for example, had much lower T than a man who turned 65 in 1987. At the same time, males in the United States are experiencing an increased incidence of birth defects in the penis and testicles, a higher rate of testicular cancer, and a general decline in reproductive health. So, when you're looking at your fellow college students full of non-binary, pansexual, socialist women's studies majors, thinking, gee, these guys seem kinda different than the photos my grandpa used to show me of himself and his friends when he was younger, no, it's not your imagination. Men.
Ha 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 ha. Funny joke here. But so let's go through this study. We'll go through the discussion stuff. And we'll just read this out, right? So this study, some of the things you got to know, it's the greater Boston area, right? Is just this. Oh, excuse me about that. Let me get my. Sorry about that. but it's from the greater Boston area, and that's who they're looking at, right? So here's the discussion on these things. So these findings indicate that the past 20 years have seen substantial age-independent decreases in male serum T concentrations, decreases that do not appear to be a consequence of contemporaneous trends in health and lifestyle considered here. It remains unclear to what these apparent population level decreases in T are attributable. Because of age, birth year, and observation time are perfectly confounded. That is, knowledge of any two determines the third. Their influences are not separable through the data analysis. Age match time differences cannot therefore be definitively attributed to historical pre-study trends affecting different birth cohorts in different ways, or rather to contemporary secular changes in the underlying population, e.g. to age-independent increases in obesity beyond those captured in the analyses described here. As noted previously, there is little evidence that the association between T and age, that is, the slope of line depicting the relationship between the two, depends on birth year, so that irrespective of birth cohort, decreases in T with age are constant. This evidence is consistent with, but does not prove, the notion that linear T-age association is consistent across different generations and implies that age-matched declines in T levels associated with each year of calendar time apply equally to men from 45 to 80 years of age. The presence of the age-matched trend itself, however, suggests that neither cross-sectional nor longitudinal investigations may properly describe the true effect of aging per se on T. Suppose, for instance, there were an unmeasured but persistent environmental exposure associated with the decreased T levels, affecting recent generations of men at birth. In that case, the cross-sectional decline of T with age might be underestimated because younger men could have lower T levels than their historic counterparts and appear more like their older contemporaries, born before the advent of the exposure, than one would normally expect the absence of such hypothetical exposure. So, I forget, it's 45 to 80 or whatever is the age that they did this limit. So this is older one, so it's not, they can't tell if there was some kind of environmental exposure around the time that these men were born that might be the causal factor. On the other hand, if age-matched trends is not historic but rather indicative of population level changes occurring during the time the subjects were under study, the age-matched trend denotes a secular trend in T concentrations over time. Under this scenario, it is easy to see that longitudinal estimates of change in T concentrations may in fact overstate the true effect of aging, because the observed effect of a year of aging would include not only in the true age-related decrease in T, but also whatever decreases the population level secular trend imposed on all men simultaneously. Such secular trend in T might be attributable to parallel population level changes in the distribution of health and lifestyle factors independent of age. We have observed, however, that although baseline and evolving health states in the study sample successfully account for a substantial proportion of the cross-sectional and longitudinal associations between age and T, they do not explain the age-matched decline in T concentrations. We therefore hypothesize that the observed age-matched decline in serum testosterone is due to some undocumented historical or contemporary influence, health-related or environmental, which manifests in observable age-matched differences in T concentrations separated by either time of observation or birth or cohort. So what they're saying is that there's something health-related or environmental right now that is likely the cause of this, right? And it's not, something that's caused that we just don't have the data or the information for. It is interesting to note that the estimated age-matched time trends in TT and BT are of comparable magnitude. This may not in itself be surprising, because the time trends are explicitly intended to remove the effects of aging itself, leaving only secular changes and other factors as contributors to changes in T levels with time. We can currently offer, however, no additional speculation as to whether one would expect secular trends in BT to differ markedly from that in TT. So now they're going to get into some of the limitations, right? Some of the limitations of the study should be acknowledged, though consistency of the methods by which TT concentrations were obtained, as well as the age-matched time trend across all pairs of study waves, indicate that design artifacts are likely not the cause of these observations. They cannot be completely discounted as contributors to the age-matched time trends, because relatively subtle changes in measurement may contribute substantially to differences between observations separated by time. So the first limitation is that maybe differences in how they observe these changes, these effects, the loss of T, and stuff like that, may not be recorded quite accurately in what they do. So that might explain some of the difference as well, beyond just the environmental factors that they hypothesize might be the result. Likewise, though, the evidence suggests that subject loss to follow-up has not influenced our result. We must acknowledge the possibility. Likewise, though evidence suggests that subject loss to follow-up has not influenced our result, we must acknowledge the possibility of biases arising from subject dropout. However, under the assumption of such survival bias, those subjects who remained in the study being younger and presumably more healthy than those lost to follow-up would be likely to exhibit higher T concentrations during follow-up than would the complete sample had it been fully observed. In such a scenario, it is likely that the estimates of longitudinal age-matched decline described here would be too low rather than too high. An added concern is that covariates considered in this analysis cannot account for all known causes of T decline. Indeed, it is exceedingly unlikely that population-level T concentrations would decline with calendar time, independently of age, of their own accord. Rather, if such declines exist, they have one or several causes that they themselves may be evolving over time. We've observed that several candidate causes observable at the level of individual subject, most notably the well-known secular declines in smoking rates and increase in relative weight, do not appear to explain completely the observed age-matched trends in Ts. It remains possible, however, that more detailed and comprehensive measurements of such factors could fully account for age-matched T trends, right? So they're saying that the things that they rule out, or the variables that they can cut out, may still be able to cover everything that's lost and be able to explain it, right? So the things they understand that affect testosterone in people, could still be the entire cause of this loss, right? So just according to this study, the reporting isn't quite clear or isn't quite sufficient in explaining what this study claims is going on, right?
Men really are different than they were just 50 or heck even 30 years ago. And those percentages are just what we know since we've been actively tracking and measuring testosterone levels. Can you imagine what they might have been 100 years ago or 200 years ago? As great as the low T virgin, high T chat memes are though, we should also probably go over what testosterone actually does. Like, according to doctors. You see, testosterone is a very important part of the human body, and as the Harvard Health Review explains, testosterone in males plays a number of important roles, including the development of the penis and testes, the deepening of the voice during puberty, the appearance of facial and pubic hair starting at puberty, muscle size and strength, bone growth and strength, sex drive, and sperm production. And testosterone is, again, so vital to our bodies, especially male bodies, that having too little of it can actually cause some pretty serious health problems. Adolescent boys with too little testosterone may not experience normal masculinization. For example, the genitals may not enlarge, facial and body hair may be scant, and the voice may not deepen normally. More seriously though, symptoms of testosterone deficiency in adult men include reduced body and facial hair, loss of muscle mass, low libido, impotence, small testicles, reduced sperm count and infertility, increased breast size, hot flashes, irritability, poor concentration and depression, loss of body hair, and brittle bones, and an increased risk of fracture. And just from reading that list...
So it'd be nice to, if Lauren had included the actual ranges in here, or what constitutes testosterone being too low, instead of just say, well, there's age-related decline, and so we have looks like it's declining over time compared, looking at that last study. But is that too low? Is that a deficiency of testosterone? Not likely. But she doesn't share any of that with us to look at there. But with that, we'll just, for argument's sake, accept some of that coming in. Yeah, man boobs and stuff like that.
List, if you pay any attention to what kinds of afflictions are becoming more and more common in many countries, things like depression, poor concentration, loss of muscle mass, and infertility, seeing a lot of those same issues on that list may have piqued your interest. Obviously, I'm not trying to attribute.
I mean, I'd have to see what she thinks are down. Like, the depression thing is obviously there, but there are far too many factors beyond just, testosterone and depression and stuff like that. And she's going to say that she's not attributing it all to that. But she kind of is, and as the video goes along, so it's not all attributable to this, but she'll argue that it is later.
The increase of multiple widespread health concerns to one single factor, but still, testosterone levels are dropping. Symptoms commonly associated with low testosterone levels are increasing. I don't know, kind of seems like maybe we should be looking into that connection. So clearly the effects of testosterone on our bodies just physically is apparent and very real. But what's a little more controversial, but at the same time, in my opinion, even more interesting, are the ways that testosterone actually affects our behavior. It's no secret that hormones affect the way we act. Ask anyone who has been pregnant or who has had PMS or who has been around anyone who has been pregnant or had PMS, and they will confirm. And just casually, if you were to ask someone how testosterone affects behavior, especially male behavior, they'd probably say something like, it causes aggression, bullying, makes you mean, toxic masculinity, etc., etc. In common parlance.
I mean, nobody's gonna argue that position, right? That she's putting out there and stuff like there. So that's she's setting up a straw man to try to knock down later, and we'll get into that.
Testosterone has pretty much become synonymous with bad behavior. In fact, just a couple of years ago, Newsweek put out an article talking about how high testosterone impacts male behavior, and pretty much all of the things they listed were negative. According to one study, high testosterone investors were more likely to take greater risks with their work. It can also apparently impair your decision making, according to one study that found that high testosterone levels were correlated with impulsivity. Plus, high testosterone can, promote narcissism and, quote, exploitative and entitlement behaviors. Don't get me wrong, too much of anything can definitely be a bad thing, testosterone included. But when we're just talking about high testosterone, not too high mind you, there is other research out there that's beginning to question the idea that testosterone's role in men is just to turn them into low IQ gorillas.
One thing she needs to do to back her position up is to show what she means by high testosterone or too high testosterone, what that means, what that position means. So I haven't gone through these studies of these particular studies are not as important to some of the bogus claims she'll make later. So I got 3 other studies that we're going to look at as we go along. But yeah, we'll go through this here.
An interesting study, participants played a modified ultimatum game, which included the opportunity to punish or reward the other player. Administration of testosterone caused increased punishment of the other player, but also increased reward of larger offers. It was found that participants treated with testosterone were more likely to punish the proposer, and that higher testosterone levels were specifically associated with increased punishment of proposers who made unfair offers, indicating that testosterone did indeed potentiate aggressive responses to provocation. However, it was also noted that when participants administered testosterone received large offers, they were more likely to reward the proposer and also choose rewards of greater magnitude. These findings drove the researchers to conclude that This increased generosity in the absence of provocation indicates that testosterone can also cause prosocial behaviors that are appropriate for increasing status. The findings are inconsistent with a simple relationship between testosterone and aggression and provide causal evidence for a more complex role for testosterone in driving status-enhancing behaviors in males. Instead of simply
And which would I'd have to look at the body of the research, but I would imagine that stuff has always kind of been there, right? The complex role and the position, pushing all that stuff there, right? So
making men more aggressive, these studies seem to show that, more broadly, testosterone enhances dominant behaviors in men, which, fair enough, can sometimes translate to aggression, but can also translate to general leadership skills, including benevolent stewardship of the people around you. Despite what our society might say now, dominance is not necessarily a bad thing, especially when coupled with good leadership. And heck, I'd even go so far as to say that aggression itself isn't even a bad thing depending on what it's targeted toward. In fact, if you're being attacked, I'd even say aggression is necessary for self-defense. And we have a lot more to talk.
oh boy, another stupid ad. I don't know. There's not a whole lot with that argument. We're not getting quite to the crazy stuff yet.
Levels affect our bodies and behavior, and that these levels are dropping. But what does this mean for our society as a whole?
And here we're gonna get in. She's got a study that is. She just read. She didn't read the study, or at least something that was a little more involved in the study. So this is a study I couldn't get a free copy of, but there's an article that quotes verbatim the results and the conclusion, or at least the bits about it that are going to be left out in the other articles that wrote about this particular study. But we'll see why she made this whole video and why she's concerned.
Well, apparently some of the low T memes are true because strong men, with strength of course being correlated with testosterone, are more likely to be right-wing. A Daily Mail article from 2013 explains that men who are strong are more likely to take a right-wing stance, while weaker men support the welfare state, researchers claim. Their study discovered a link between a man's upper body strength and their political views. Scientists from Aarhus University in Denmark collected data on bicep size, socioeconomic status, and support for economic redistribution from hundreds in America, Argentina, and Denmark. The figures revealed that men with higher upper body strength were less likely to support left-wing policies on the redistribution of wealth. But men with low upper body strength were more likely to put their own self-interest aside and support a welfare state. Super unbiased reporting there, I'm sure. The researchers found no link between upper body strength and redistribution opinions among women, while leftists.
So let's look at that study before she gets into it, or at least a bit about it. That's important. Let's escape. I think it's this one right here. So this is an Atlantic article covering it. So the parts that are important are the results and the implications. So what's left out of the Daily Mail article on this study is that, we'll read the results right here. Rich men who would benefit least from redistribution were more likely to be opposed to it, but only when they also had large biceps. There was a negative correlation between the two, so that rich men with less muscle strength were more open to redistribution. In men of lower socioeconomic status, the correlation was reversed. Stronger men were more in favor of redistribution, while men with smaller muscles were less likely to support it. These associations were made significant even once the researchers controlled for political party. No relationship between strength and ideology was, however, seen in women. So what was left out of that article is just, well, if you're strong, you're going to be right-wing. You're not going to support redistribution of the wealth thing. But no, the other part that plays a factor in it is your socioeconomic status, which is completely left out, right? So she's going to go over with some stereotypes of low T college socialists and all that other stuff that she's making fun of earlier and come through here. But her study doesn't back any of that. Now, there's probably a lot of issues with how this goes because it's it's an Evo Psych paper, and there's a lot of issues within Evo Psych that are far beyond what I can do in this short live stream and stuff here. But just ignoring that and just accepting the results as is and the conclusions. it doesn't support what she's going to go into a whole tirade on. So the implications of it here from there. So, Evo Psych, evolutionary speaking, write the authors, it is a fitness error for weaker contestants to attempt to seize resources when they cannot prevail, and for stronger ones to cede what they can cost effectively defend, at least in men. So what they're saying is that if you're strong and you have the stuff, you're less likely to give it up, right? Which goes against her pro studies, right? If she's gonna argue this here, it goes against her pro studies for generosity and stuff like that there. And then those that where was that? Cannot prevail for the one stronger to see the one constant. And so the other thing is that if you're strong enough to take it, right, to attack those that have it and take it, you're more likely to favor the redistribution, right? So those socialists that want to redistribute wealth and push their thing must all be pretty high T. Just saying, by her own argument, if she's going to use this study to support her, and we'll watch this stuff here, right? So what they're saying evolutionary isn't necessarily that big strong men want right-wing policies just because they're big and strong. It's it's based on more complex interactions and self-interest.
This may paint that data as saying weak men are just more altruistic. Someone who actually has more testosterone than a room full of Vox editors, and yes, I include myself in that, might instead say, it looks like strong men are less likely to be socialists who hope to leech off the success of those more competent than themselves, and less likely to advocate the government coerce people into doing things they don't want to do.
As we just pointed out, the study does not support that, right? So all the socialists that want to take your money, Lauren, they're all high T, right? You got that, socialist, right? You want the money, you're all high T there. You're the strong ones in our society. And so, this is kind of how stupid you look when you don't look into these studies further than what a Daily Mail article will say about it.
Different perspectives. And before anyone tries to chime in with that whole right-wingers are just selfish shtick, remember, on average, Republicans do give more to charity than Democrats, okay? There's this thing called voluntary giving that I feel gets left out of the wealth redistribution conversation a lot. But anyway, one delicious anecdote that displays this trend quite nicely was that time the BuzzFeed Try Guys tested their testosterone levels, and all but one of them had a T-score in the 200s, which is interesting considering that the average T-score of a guy in his mid-20s is actually in the mid-600s. Yeah, those are ridiculously, though not surprisingly, low levels.
Well, so then they're not socialists that want to redistribute the wealth then, right? Your argument's going to paint them as all socialists are low T stuff when, your study argues against it. Now, I'm not saying that obviously ignoring some of the issues with Evo Psych to begin with, and just accepting the study as is, but...
So low, in fact, that even President Trump, who's in his 70s, has a higher T level than those guys with a score of 440. Heck, I'm pretty sure even I have a higher T level than they do. It's just, it's so very low. And
you wouldn't. You just wouldn't. It's not the, you're not a very masculine looking woman there, Lauren. So you're probably, given the differences, you're probably pretty low on the T scale.
By the way, can you imagine Trump as president with a T-score in, like, the 660s? The wall would be built by now, and it would extend around California and New York, I'm sure.
Good joke, I guess? Maybe. It's, none of that would have any impact on whether or not he could get the wall done.
Think that if we were to just sprinkle testosterone in the water, that everybody would soon be wearing MAGA hats, and that every guy who's less physically strong is just some literal communist, or that if you're not the physical embodiment of Dolph Lundgren, then you're not really a man? No, obviously not. None of this is that simple.
That's what you were implying earlier, right, with your joke. That's the underlying premise of your joke.
But considering the health problems that are becoming more and more frequent in our societies, and how much the Overton window in Western countries has shifted left recently, I think, yeah, testosterone levels are something we should talk about. Oh, and if the impacts to your physical health or society don't concern you, then maybe the fact that testosterone also impacts your dating life will. Yeah, did you know that low T men are literally more likely to be cucks?
Yeah, this next study does not show that at all, and it actually shows some pretty toxic behaviors related um, um, to dating and stuff like that she doesn't cover. But we'll get into that when she goes over this here and what she's taken from the news article.
I mean, I'm extrapolating a bit, but I'm right. As one study reported, in a sample of undergraduate men, the relationship between testosterone, intrasexual competitiveness, and mate retention behavior was examined. Results showed that higher basal testosterone predicted more self-reported mate retention effort. This relationship was mediated by intrasexual competitiveness, such that high T men reported more intrasexual competitiveness, which, when included in the model, predicted mate retention and reduced the initial T-mate retention relationship to statistical non-significance. It seems obvious to...
So let's pull that study up. Where do I got it? Biceps, not that one. Men with higher testosterone levels. New research suggests that men with higher levels of testosterone tend to devote more energy to keeping their romantic partners faithful and in a relationship with them. The study published in the journal Physiology and Behavior examined what is known as mate retention behavior. So where is our... So we'll go through here. It's a short article. A great deal of research has previously focused on the role of testosterone and androgen plays in men's mate seeking and competition for mates, explained study author Stephen Arneke. By contrast, very little research has examined whether testosterone relates to other forms of mating relevant competition, such as effort aimed at retaining a mating partner. This includes benefit provisioning, e.g., doing nice things for your partner to highlight your commitment to her, such as buying gifts, proposing marriage, and cost inflicting, e.g., threatening other men to stay away, acts meant to hold on to exclusive access to one's mate. So part of the cost inflicting behaviors would be preventing, your girlfriend from going out and stuff like that. You know, you're not going to let her go out and hang out with other guys and stuff like that. That would be included in there. This is an important gap in knowledge because unlike most other mammalian species, humans generally pair bond, Arneke said. In other words, we form relatively long-term mating relationships that are often characterized by biparental care of offsprings. Therefore, we wanted to know whether testosterone plays a role in mating competition once a male has secured a romantic partner. The researchers collected saliva samples. We'll go past that. Our results suggested that there is a modest relationship between testosterone and mate retention, but that this relationship is not direct in nature. Rather, testosterone predicts holding it more competitive attitude towards a member of the same sex, intersexual competition, and it is this characteristic of intersexual competitiveness that in turn predicts mate retention. Moreover, this relationship seems to be strongest for cost inflicting rather than benefit provision, acts of mate retention. Right? So, the high T guy, the guys, and we look at the study, it's not that it's just high T and low T stuff here. It was comparing, those that saw their testosterone level increase the most, right, compared to someone. So testosterone level increased after these competitive natures and stuff. So that's left out. It's not just someone with low testosterone versus someone with high testosterone at the base level and stuff. There, it's after a certain study was set around a certain competitive behavior over that kind of thing. So testosterone levels spike. So they could be both similar levels of testosterone, but one spiked higher than the other. So it's not a high T low T thing. It's how much extra testosterone was introduced in the study. I think I have. So, but, and it also says our study was correlational in its design, and so one cannot make any causal assumptions about whether testosterone influences levels of intrasexual. So that's another issue with the study. It's a correlation study. It's not a causal one. So you can't, like Lauren is doing, make a causal case from this study to what she's doing. So where low T guys are cucks, right? So, yeah, making herself look like an ass. Let's see. I think I have the actual study. Is this the actual study? Make sure this one, or is this the next one? Show more affiliate. I think that's the next one. Right? Who's on this one? Is this the Anarchy one? If it's the Anarchy one, then it's the... No, it's not the Anarchy one. Alright, so this is a different one. It's a different one. So we'll get to that one next.
The state, but it's actually supported by science that if you ever see any guys out there who either don't care or are even turned on by the fact that their girlfriends are either flirting with or seeing other guys, you're likely looking at a low T specimen right there. And not only are testosterone levels correlated with intrasexual competition, but according to another study, it also makes men more flirtatious. As some researchers noted, in interactions with women, men who had experienced a greater T increase during a...
Yeah, so I misspoke on the last study compared. So I was thinking this study was the same as the last study that way. So that little bit I had before was kind of wipeout. So that's kind of the mistake to make me do it live. But not all I said was wrong. Just a little bit.
Contest subsequently showed more interest in the women, engaged in more self-presentation, smiled more, and made more eye contact. No such effects were seen in interactions with other men. Maybe all the low T, high T memes are right to a certain extent. In any case,
so this is wrong. This isn't about low or high T base, right? So what I was saying about the base difference. We'll go through the discussion portion of this study. So the discussion part. This is the first study to show that men experience elevated T levels during intrasexual competition, subsequently show more affiliative behavior during interactions with women. Those men with greater rises in T levels subsequently showed more interest in a woman, engaged in more... So all the stuff she said there that she quoted. Although the behavioral ratings could have been affected by the knowledge of the stimulus person's sex, this cannot account for the reported effect of the change in T on participants' behavior at the rate, as the raters were completely blind to this change. Our findings complement previous studies that show contact with unfamiliar folk and increased in T levels. In addition, we report novel findings. Endogenous T increased prior to social contact has an effect on subsequent behaviors. Simultaneous here, taken together, the evidence suggests that during encounters with the opposite sex, T may function to promote the display of affiliative behaviors that increase a man's mating prospects. Although we did not specifically measure romantic or sexual interest, our findings suggest that T in men during social contact with women is linked to the initiation of courtship behavior. So, this isn't even something causal, right? It suggests that maybe this is the case, right? So the detection of these behavioral changes in men very soon after competitive interactions suggests that T may have dynamically regulated their behavior through non-genomic mechanisms. Genomic mechanisms involve the activation of intracellular androgen receptors, that modulate nuclear transcription and translocation of steroid receptor complexes in the nucleus, typically taking days or hours to exert an influence. By contrast, the non-genomic route can affect an organism rapidly through T binding. Through these changes, the activity of the central nervous system is modulated, thereby leading to a change in behavior. The main findings of our study are consistent with the fast non-genomic actions of androgens, suggesting that transient changes in T level can promote certain forms of social behavior, right? And so what we got down here is just a change, right? So we can get an influx of testosterone, right? So it says nothing about your base level of testosterone as she's laying out. Oh. And the difference that's shown is that those that saw a greater increase of testosterone showed more of the affiliative behaviors than those that didn't increase quite as much, right? Greatest rise in T. Competitive tasks may perceive they were challenges. According to the challenge hypothesis, T should increase content social status. Dominant males may have access to more or better females because complete female defense polygamy, or because they compete for research which females are attracted to research defense. One probable reason why high and middle ranking males typically manage over lower ranking males instead of direct stimulatory. So, I mean, we're going to have some other issues with some Evo psych stuff in here as well, but instead of direct stimulatory effect, an alternate possibility is that those men whose T levels responded most to competitive situations were also more focused on mating, right? So they're the alternative hypothesis that saw the T levels rise higher were those that were more interested in mating to begin with, right? And that accounts for the different T levels there. So the affiliative behavior is not necessarily caused by the testosterone increase, but it was already there, and you just saw an increase in testosterone, right? Yeah, so follow-up studies and administer T. Yeah, so this doesn't show quite what she thinks it is. Even so it's not base T, right? So if you're one of the 200 T Vox guys she's talking about, or President Trump, that so those Vox guys could see a higher increase in testosterone, by if you go by the first hypothesis in here, based on this data. So the guys with 200 things in a competition could see the higher increase than somebody like Trump, who might see a lower one, right? And so it would go completely against what Lauren was arguing. But in the case of this, the other way around, this other hypothesis that's possible based on this data, the release of T isn't necessarily the causal factor behind it. It's the other way around. So, yeah, her study doesn't demonstrate what she thinks it does. I don't know if there's much left on the video. Yeah, there's about 20 seconds. We'll see what she has left, and we'll call her a day.
I think that's a good place to leave things, and as always, I would...
All right, so that's the end of it. Yeah, thanks for stopping by, chat. I'm going to call her quits here, go grab lunch before work, and